Next on Imagenes, the earthquake in Colombia. Saludos. Welcome to Imagenes. I'm Miguel Perez. They are the images of destruction and despair, the horrible sights you see in earthquake-ravaged Armenia and its neighboring towns in the central highlands of Colombia's coffee-growing region. Almost every building, even those still considered habitable, have huge cracks on the walls. Almost every person, even those who seemingly survived unscathed, will likely bear internal scars forever. The figures are alarming. Close to 1,200 dead, countless injuries, 200,000 people homeless, and still hundreds who are missing. Unfortunately, natural disasters always do the most damage among the poorest people, the most vulnerable. And the earthquake that struck Colombia on January 25 was no different. It turned the poorest neighborhoods into shanty towns. I saw it with my own eyes, and so did one of our guests, Dr. Felix Roque, who just returned from Armenia. Dr. Roque heads Doctors to the Rescue, an organization of Hispanic New Jersey doctors devoted to assisting the victims of natural disasters in Latin America. Also with us is Jaime Lozada of Fundación Colombia, one of 18 New Jersey Colombian organizations that have band together to conduct a statewide relief campaign for Colombia. And also Wilson David Bernal of the Hispanic American Alliance, who is also involved in the relief effort. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. It's a pleasure having you here.
Thank you, Miguel. Thank you.
Dr. Roque, we saw you and I, who went to Colombia, saw incredible things there. Why don't you just give us a brief overview as a doctor of what you found when you got there?
I tell you, it's very, very difficult to encapsulate everything because, I tell you, to me, it was a human tragedy. The sorrow, the fear in the children's eyes, the mother that could not help her daughter who had fever and diarrhea. It was actually dehydrated. It was dying in front of her, and she could not do anything about it. I mean, those were moments that I will never forget in my life.
The conditions in the shanty towns that we saw, the unsanitary conditions.
It was terrible. I mean, you have children playing inside what I thought was water, but then later that night, when I rewinded my video, it was actually human excrement and feces they were playing with. It was incredible. It was horrendous. I had never seen this before.
Yeah. And you also, as heading the Doctors to the Rescue, you took some 1,500 pounds of medicine there and toured a lot of the hospitals. What did you see in the hospitals that we toured?
It was very, the human conditions in those hospitals were incredible. You actually had people patients next to each other, sharing, the portable urinals because they had none. The contaminations, the potential for contaminations were incredible. Out of a 220-bed hospital, now they only had 12. And they were divided. Women on one side, separated by a mere curtain, and the men on the other side. And it was horrendous. They had no antibiotics. They had no medical equipment. It was like going back to, it was chaos.
What was amazing about what we saw is that the hospitals themselves, the places that are expected to help people, even the fire station in Armenia was destroyed, and the firemen couldn't get out to help people. And the hospitals themselves, where people are expected to be treated, well, they had no space that was really habitable because the buildings were close to falling apart. So they were using other places that were not the hospitals as hospital sites.
Correct.
But we have a video. Dr. Roque and I and a few others who went with us recorded some sites so that you can see with us. So let's watch the videotape right now. And let's describe, Doctor, what we're seeing here. These are some of the kids that we saw.
Yeah, here's what I mentioned. The child that was actually run over by a motorcycle because right next to the street is where they actually built the shanty towns.
Yeah, and they're right next to the traffic.
Right next to the traffic. So this young boy got actually hit by a motorcycle.
And these are the people, the men in the car there that we saw briefly. People drop by the shanty towns and drop off food and give away food because the government hasn't really been doing much as far as this food distribution yet.
Correct. They're actually cooking industries because they have no place to cook. Here are the medical supplies which we actually took to the hospitals.
This is the hospital in Calarcá, where you are treating a woman right now.
Correct. Actually, the young lady sustained a substantial fall. She has a lumbar pain, and she has lumbar radiculopathy, had shooting pain down the legs. Here is actually inside the wards. You could actually see the destruction. It's incredible.
This is the hospital itself that we're watching, the hospital in one of the towns called Calarcá. And as we were touring that hospital, the doctors that gave us the tour told us how unsafe the building was, and we decided to get out of there.
Absolutely. The walls were actually shaking, and at that moment I said, Miguel, we got to get out of here.
Now, this is a ward of the hospital that has been built or used temporarily, or we saw that briefly, but that was a part of that hospital. This is another hospital now. This is the hospital in Montenegro, which was also extremely destroyed.
Correct.
And this is the head of the hospital there, who is director of the hospital, who's showing us the few patients that she's able to take care of, which are very few at the moment.
Yeah, that gentleman sustained an open fracture, and at that time they'll have no place to reduce the fracture because they don't have the equipment, the x-ray equipment, so he'll be like that for a while.
And at this point we're walking around downtown Armenia, and the building that you see collapsed there is the assembly building where the legislative body of the state of Quindío meets. And it just became dust, that building. It was a fairly modern building as well. But the destruction that we saw in downtown Armenia was incredible. The buildings, there's a building that collapsed. We went there with Edgar Nunez, who's a community leader here in New Jersey, and he went looking for his office. And when he found his building that housed his business, this is what he found, rubble.
That's correct.
It's amazing how many people are still missing in Colombia and believed to be buried under the rubble in many of these buildings, especially in the downtown area that had all these high-rises. Now, this boy was showing you his condition. He has a...
Yes, he has some type of rash. I'm not a dermatologist. I'm a pain management doctor. But he was explaining to me that he got it, that he has no way to take showers, and basically he's getting worse, and he wanted me to help him.
This is the fire station I mentioned earlier. The whole building collapsed on top of 14 fire trucks and ambulances. None of them were able to get out to assist people. 8 people died in that building, 5 of them firemen. 17 people were originally trapped in the building, and this is the destruction of the fire trucks. So obviously, the town of Armenia needs some help in terms of some fire trucks that some of the municipalities in New Jersey may be able to donate to them. There's Edgar Nunez, community leader, taking some of the medicine that you guys took to Colombia. What is the purpose, doctor, of Doctors to the Rescue, and why did you take medicine there?
Our mission, basically, we actually got established when the Hurricane Mitch came about. The idea came from the military. I've been in the Army approximately 22 years, and the military has a rapid deployment force. They're actually ready. The military in this country is ready to fight, but on a standby basis. They have to be prepared. So when Hurricane George came about, I felt helpless. I couldn't help my brothers in Central and South, Latin America. So when Hurricane Mitch came about, a group of doctors composed of the Spanish-American Medical Association, we all got together and we said, wow, you know, we wish we could do something about it. And we came up with the idea, Doctors to the Rescue, DAR, dar, to give in Spanish. So basically my mission was more of a logistic type of mission, to go there and to see what the situation was all about. Come back, I have a listing of all the needs that the hospitals need.
And they gave you a long list at every hospital.
It was a long laundry list, yes. But what I'm going to try to do now is meet with the doctors and try to see how we could try to get some of the medications, and with the help of the Colombian and the Hispanic community, try to send it over there.
Well, the Colombian community is well represented here today. We have Jaime and Wilson, and they can tell us about what is going on in the state of New Jersey as far as mobilizing the community to donate. And the video that the doctor brought and some pictures that I took for the Bergen Record, which we'll see in a few minutes, should illustrate to the Colombian community that this problem is not over and won't be over for a long time. And I imagine that you guys are now going to be using this video to take to the community and show them how their relief work is necessary for years to come, maybe. Jaime, what are you doing with the Colombian organizations?
I do represent one organization, this Foundation of Colombia, but we are pulling together. It's 18 organizations in New Jersey and the same in New York working together. Why we do this? There is always a time frame from the government to government relationship, and there is too many barriers and filters to go through to get the help and the relief aid.
Too much bureaucracy.
You might call it that way, but reality is this way. In the day by day, you have to eat, you have family, you have to provide clothing, and there is no place to eat, there is no place to cook, and that's why at the beginning was a little bit of convulsion into my country.
But the thing is that you guys are trying to raise funds, raise food, medicine, clothing, and take it directly to the people of Colombia. You're not really even going through the government. You're going through relief agencies in Colombia.
We are going through one of the sources of information of which one is the real situation is through the churches in Colombia and the different civic organizations that are working there. Based on what they said and they are telling on a daily basis, we are trying to cope with those needs. We start sending food as a first and immediate help. We start getting and setting up priorities. So we send medicines. That's why Dr. Roque and Doctors to the Rescue did. And all the organizations work with one purpose. For the weeks to come, everybody's working to gather medicines as a first relief. Everybody right now is working to gather food and try to help them bringing the food through containers, through different organizations that are right now.
One of the things we found in Colombia when we went to the shanty towns is the people were telling us they're not getting the food. The food that they're getting from other Colombians who drive by, as we saw briefly in the video, other Colombians who drive by and pour groceries out of their car window and just give out what they have and they share with each other. But as far as an organized relief effort, a government relief effort, giving out food, very, very little. I saw the Catholic Church doing it in one park, and I saw this Colombian Salvation Army giving out hot food to children in another park. That's all I saw during 6 days that I was touring the whole town for 16 hours a day. And so there isn't that much. I saw more of the individual people helping each other than the government helping the people. So, you know, they are really, really depending on what New Jersey does for them. Wilson, what is your involvement with the Hispanic American Alliance, and what are you doing to help them?
Miguel, we have been putting together in different ways supplies and medical supplies and food, because we know this is a crisis, you know. But before elaborating on this one, I want to thank you, gentlemen, for being in my country and being in the town I was born. I know.
That's right, you're from Calarcá, which is one of the most affected towns.
My family is there. I have about 80 cousins living in the area, and only 3 are able to live in their own homes. Everybody else is now
lost their homes.
Yeah, they lost their home, and that's a very, very shaking experience. But we are trying to look at not only what we have to provide. We have to provide food for these people for maybe 3 months at least, and we need 150 tons of food a day. Now, we have to look at the building of the state. We are talking about maybe, I would say, 10 years to be back on where we were before the earthquake. So this is a long task. It's very expensive and emotional and in money.
Just to remove the rubble that we saw there, the estimates are years to remove the rubble, because there's so much destruction in terms of like cleaning up and starting. There are streets that are completely blocked by buildings on both sides falling over. There are incredible number of stories. The anecdotes just go on and on and on. You tour the downtown area, and people tell you what happened in each building, how many people were killed when this particular, there's one building in particular, 9-story building. People got out during the initial tremor, during the initial earthquake, and then they stood on the street. They all got out because the walls were cracked and so forth, but they got out all right. The second tremor came, the building fell on the street, killed 20 people. And like that, over and over again, everywhere you go, there's an anecdote, there's a story behind what's the incredible sadness in telling these stories, incredible sadness I felt in taking pictures of these people. It was so sad. I'm shooting the pictures of the children, and I felt so sad having to do it, because just watching what I was watching through my camera was terrible. It was just very, very depressing. And I think the Colombian community here and the Hispanic community in general should be made aware of what is gone there. It's nothing compared to what you see on television. I mean, we're going to show you some video, we're going to show you some pictures, but it's nothing until you see it. Doctor, you agree?
I agree. It's a human tragedy, it's a horror. I mean, it's, you cannot compare this. I mean, we train for war. I've seen tragedy, but this takes takes to live it. And you see it on television, but it's not the same.
Well, here's a picture. It's one of let me show you my photography here. These are the pictures that I took there for the Bergen Record, and we're going to see. This is the destruction I was talking about, Doctor, where we saw this over and over again all over Armenia. Buildings from each side of the street collapsing into the middle of the streets, where there are areas where the traffic cannot move around. These are the military police, of course, that are all over the city guarding against looters, because there was a lot of lootings and rioting in the first 2 or 3 days after the earthquake. So the military police is guarding all. This is 2 young women whose mother lives in Hackensack. I located them, and they had to crawl and walk all over the rubble for several blocks to get to their house. This is how they found their house, walking all over this. These, of course, are the children. The children were the saddest part. This young girl was living in a shanty town. And as the doctor said earlier, the conditions there were horrible. Remember that little girl?
I remember. It was sad. Actually, you could see the horror around her, and she had her little toy, playing with her little toy.
Yeah. No nos olviden says that sign, which means do not forget us. And I think it was very relevant that the people of Armenia were pleading that way. And this is the Virgin Mary in the hospital in the town of Montenegro. Fell over and cracked her face. And I thought that was had some symbolism in it. This is a food distribution in a park called Uribe Park in Armenia, where the armed guards had to keep control there. These are the faces that we saw, the little children with this agony in their faces. This is a food line, the Salvation Army food line. They're all holding their little buckets there where they were served food. This is the same little girl we saw earlier in the shanty town. Doctor, sad?
Very sad. I have never seen such conditions in this country, and not even from my native country of Cuba. I have never seen such bad conditions, and I just plead to the community, to all Hispanics, and to all human beings in this world to really help them, because they need all the help. That little girl there, I'm sure she hasn't eaten for days, and and the sad thing, Miguel, is when I asked her, what would you like me to get you? And you remember what she said. Bring me a little doll. Incredible. I mean, the suffering is incredible.
Yeah, well, that's what children think about. You know, they're not worried about food. They're worried about a little toy, a little doll. Yeah. Is there an effort in New Jersey to, as far as clothing is concerned, to do something for the children in terms of collecting little toys or collecting things that that can also be sent to the children?
We are right now collecting in different centers. We have Morristown area center. We have
centers all over the place, right?
Elizabeth, there are 7 centers that are collecting food. We have in Hudson County through different churches. And we have a phone number that we can provide if people want to get in contact with us and give us help. We right now are packing containers to send the food. It is true when you mentioned before there was a difficulty at the beginning to bring the relief that was coming from the outside. You have to understand one thing: there were no roads, there were no bridges, there was no way to reach the place besides helicopters. And if the fire department couldn't reach them being there, because it's been destroyed, the same thing happened with the hospital, the same thing happened with the army headquarters. Everything got destroyed. So the people who's been trained to do that help weren't unable to do so.
The people who want to make donations at this distribution of these collection centers that you've established all over the state can call a number, and let's give them that number now. It's 863-5116, and that's in area code 201 for further information.
Yes.
On the relief effort. If you want to know where to drop off your nearest drop-off place so you can make a donation, call 201-863-5116. Wilson, you're also involved in this statewide effort?
Yes, Miguel, we've been working very actively, and in fact, we have a meeting today with the Jewish community in Bergen County to see what we can do, because, like we mentioned before, we have to look not only to feed these people for the next 2 months. We have to see how the full area, the whole area in the Quindío department will be recovered in the next 5 to 10 years.
One of the beautiful things I found was happening before I left for Colombia, I was there for about a week or 6 days, was the Latino community helping each other out. I interviewed this Colombian woman who said, I volunteered when they had a problem in Santo Domingo and I helped them. And I volunteered when they had a hurricane in Central America and I helped them. And now Colombia's in trouble and everybody wants to help me. And she was so happy that that camaraderie was going on. Do you see that happening? All the Latinos coming and saying, presente?
And that's why we like to insist and, and tell our people, we are one sisterhood, brotherhood. We have to be here for each other. And one of the things I want to thank you because this is the opportunity to bring this to the attention of everybody. We are very, very, very pleased with the help we have received in the area, not only from the Spanish community or the Latino community, for that matter. People from different schools. I received a call from Middletown, New Jersey, a school who want to become a sister school to a small town in Colombia, working together.
One of the things that happened there, thank God the schools were not in session that day.
Oh, yeah.
Because 60% of the schools were totally destroyed. They toppled over. If the children had been in them, if the children had been in the daycare centers, there were so many daycare centers that were totally destroyed. If the children had been in them, it would have been a lot worse. The death toll would have been much higher. So we were lucky that way. But what happens to education in Armenia? I mean, there's practically no schools standing. So there are all these problems that are long-term problems. It's not a question of just food, which is the immediate problem, but how do we provide for an education for these children? The children of Armenia, I think, are the worst tragedy of all because they're going to have to live this for a long, long time. Yeah. And I saw you picking them up, doctor. Every time, you were like, you wanted to take them home, some of these kids.
It was sad. It broke my heart, and it was the sad thing is like I said before, the mother saying, "Help my daughter, she's dying," and I couldn't do nothing because I didn't bring any of my equipment. The only thing I brought was medicine, which was donated by the Colombian community and the Hispanic community, but I could not do anything for them, and that broke my heart. But I am coming back, and I have a laundry list of all the stuff that they need, and I'll be talking to all the hospital directors tomorrow, so they'll be here.
One of the things, you came back with a list from the hospitals, yes, from the shanty towns, yes, from people you met on the street who said, look, I need a wheelchair. My mother just has, had a fall during the earthquake and is an invalid now. Yes. I mean, the requests were so many and so powerful that you wanted to reach out to every person. And again, if the Colombian community here in New Jersey sees your tape, doctor, and sees some of my pictures and sees this program, I think they'll be motivated to keep working. Because people lose their... Is that happening where people already begin to lose the interest in helping?
Actually, because we are trying to not letting that happen, we are working in a long-term effort. When I said before that we prioritize, is we saw what is needed now, what is going to be next, and what is the long-term effect. We are making sure that we are not going to forget the Colombian community, all the people that needs food every day, on a daily basis. There is families, entire families with one set of clothing. That's all what they have. That is all what they have left. But besides that, there is a home. People living in tents made out of plastic, living night by night in front of your rubble house.
And when people
that is terrible.
When people think of tents, our audience should understand that we're not talking about a professional army tent. We're talking about a chunk of plastic put over 2 poles or 2 sticks or 2 brooms or whatever. I mean, these are not very secure housing or living by any means. It's raining half the time, the dust. Some people have begun to clean up the city, pick up because, the bulldozers, there's just so many to go around, and to clean out of this rubble. Well, what happens when they start cleaning up all over the town, they have raised this cloud of dust all over the city, which everybody is now breathing.
Right. Miguel, I want to mention, now that you say dust, I went at one of the hospitals and you can see a line of 10 children waiting for one nebulizer treatment. The nebulizer is because they have shortness of breath. Myself and yourself, we actually got sick by being there. I'm still a little sick from my lungs, but you can see that was horrendous, for them to wait for the nebulizer, out of breath, waiting for her, the other child to finish his treatment. It was incredible. So they're dying.
There are countless stories. We could be here all day, the doctor and I, telling our viewers what we saw there and how much the need is. But both of you, Wilson and Jaime, what do you see in the Colombian community? Are they aware from what they see on television how grave the situation is, or is it graver maybe than the community realizes?
I think based on the information that we have, the people don't realize how bad it was. We have seen the reports on TV and newspapers, but the people who have been there, like you gentlemen, they say, you know, we cannot understand, we cannot understand the real tragedy what's going on. And especially people don't realize that besides food, there is an emotional aftershock in the community. The people are very, some people are going nuts.
The first couple of days, people were stunned. They just sat there because it was like if the bomb had been dropped and they didn't know if they were dead or alive. There are neighborhoods there, the Brasilia Nueva neighborhood in Armenia. It looks like it's been bombed. There's nothing left standing. And the people are living through this saying, well, you know, how do I begin? Where do I begin?
We are trying not to let that happen. And we are exploring with our community that the effort is going to be for long term. We are working together. That's why we pull 18 organizations, Colombian organizations and Hispanic organizations.
We'll have to end it there. I'm Miguel Perez, and I remind you to watch NJ Latinos and www.njlatinos.com. You can find out what's going on this program. I'm Miguel Perez, and I'll see you next week on another edition of Images Imagenes. Hasta pronto.